In episode 5, Sweet Tooth and Jep are able to get out of there, and when they get to a place they think is safe, Jep thanks Gus for having his back, and then he teaches him the pound. Tommy then tells Gus that he's planning to go with him to Colorado, and Gus gives him a giant hug. The next step is trying to figure out how to get out of the area they're in, and as they're trying to do so, they come across Bear. Bear is now a bear without a den, if you will. So in a way, she's kind of a free agent, but she asks for a word with Gus, alone. And that's when she gives him the information that her team was able to find on Birdie. It's not much, but it's more than they had. It's an address with the word Go Grow. Bear then says goodbye and heads off, and Gus says, "Where are you going?" And she says, "The train." Tommy thinks she's lying, though, saying the train doesn't come around here, but she says, "It does, it just doesn't stop." And Gus brings up the fact that they're also headed to the train. And he attempts to mend the bad blood between Bear and Tommy by saying, "Well, let's all go there." Bear lets them know that in order to get to the train quick, they have to pass through the Valley of Sorrows, which is this valley of very toxic purple flowers. Nobody goes near it unless they have a death wish, but because of this, she knows that the animal army won't be there either. It's also the fastest way to get to the train, so that's where they're headed. As they're walking, Bear asks Gus, "What do you actually know about Birdie?" And Gus says, "I know that she doesn't have antlers, and I know that I was her whole life, so she's got to be looking for me too." Bear tells him, sometimes when we prop up a person in our minds, they don't end up living up to who we think they're going to be. This causes a fight between Bear and Tommy, and Gus once again has to remind them that they're on the same team. They then come across a parachute in a tree, and Tommy explains to both of them what a parachute was used for. Gus thinks that this is all just a lie, and that no one would leave such a magical item just lying in a tree. But as Gus is explaining this, behind him is the dead parachute jumper hanging from the tree. And in order to shield this from him, both Bear and Tommy say, "Yeah, you're right, kid, let's just keep walking." And they head to the Valley of Sorrows. As Gus goes ahead, Tommy and Bear start having a conversation where Bear says that just because she's not in the army anymore doesn't mean she's going to stop helping hybrids. But she wants to know what Tommy's motives are. And Tommy basically says, "It's none of your business what my motives are." She then asks him, "Do you honestly think that his mother's alive?" And Tommy says, "It doesn't matter what I think. That kid has hope coming out of every pore of his body. I don't know where he gets it from, but he's got it." A short time after that, they finally arrive at the Valley of Sorrows, and now they have to find out a way to get over the Valley of Sorrows. There's a bridge, but it's not exactly the sturdiest looking bridge. And it might hold Bear and Gus, but it's definitely not holding Tommy's weight. And this causes another fight between Tommy and Bear, and Gus gets sick of it, so he heads up to the bridge. But when Tommy and Bear see him, they try to get him off of it. Although it's too late. He's halfway across. And that's when the bridge starts breaking. Gus is hanging on by one arm, and there's not much that Bear or Tommy can do, because if they cross the bridge, they're going to fall through too. And eventually, the bridge ends up breaking, and Gus ends up falling into the valley. The fall knocks Gus out, and when he's knocked out, he has a dream where he's reunited with Pubba. He explains to his Pubba that he broke his rules, and his Pubba says, "I knew you would. I just wanted you to be that innocent kid forever. But you have more important things to do. There are other kids like you out there, and those other kids are counting on you." His dad escorts him over to a mirror and says, "I see you, and soon the world will see you too." But then all of a sudden, Pubba disappears, and Gus starts banging on the mirror for him, but he doesn't return. What does show up in his place is General Abbott. With fire in his eyes, he says, "So nice to meet you, Gus." And it terrifies Gus. Luckily, he's awoken from this dream when Tommy and Bear get him to the end of the Valley of Sorrows. Bear put on the parachuter outfit to shield her from the flowers, and Tommy draped himself in the parachute. When they get to the end of the valley, they have another fight, and Gus has gotten sick of it. So he does what Tommy taught him to, and he instructs them both to make a fist and pound it out. They keep walking, and it's not long before they find the train tracks, and they hear the train coming. Now, before we get to the update on Dr. Singh, I need to give you an update on the old doctor, Gladys. She's living out her days on a farm when one night she gets a visit from a bunch of last men and their leader, General Abbott. And that's because General Abbott is well aware that Gladys does not have a terminal illness. She was faking it. And she admits as much, saying, "I'm done working for you." He sits her down and explains that there's a second wave coming. And he's the type of person that isn't willing to sit back and let this disease kill him. He wants to go at it full force. And she says, "No, you're the type of person who's a monster." Abbott doesn't really have time to argue, though. So he gets to the point, demanding to know where the book is. And Gladys says, "I left it with my replacement." Now that he has the information he needs, Abbott gets up to leave, But before he does, Gladys says they're just kids, and they're going to live long after we're gone, no matter what you do. Abbott then exits the house where one of the soldiers opens up a case and hands him a syringe that looks an awful lot like the syringe that Gus's dad had when he went after the last men who came looking for him. The soldier then heads into the house, and we're left to believe that he injects Gladys with whatever is in that syringe. Abbott then heads off to find the book. Of course, the book is with Dr. Singh. And Dr. Singh is still going through his research, but he has a slightly bigger issue. Not only is his lawn full of purple flowers, but he also has the body of his dead neighbor, and the other neighbors have noticed that she's missing. They're actually handing out missing posters. When Dr. Singh is asked about if he's seen her or not, he plays dumb, saying, "No, we haven't seen her since the party." When he gets back in the house, he hands Ronnie the missing poster, and he's freaking out a little bit, but his wife reminds him, "We didn't do anything. The horse killed her." He then gets a message from the clinic letting him know that he has a delivery at the clinic, and this is the delivery he's been waiting for. So both him and Ronnie hop on their horse and head to the office. When they arrive, they're surprised because the nurse practitioner isn't there, although the package is. But when they open it up, they don't find a living hybrid. Instead, they find a note that says, "Out of hybrids." And Dr. Singh starts freaking out a little bit. Then they notice that the freezer door is open. And that's an issue because that's where they were hiding the body of Karen. And the fact that the freezer door was left open when Dr. Singh knows that he closed it and the nurse practitioner is missing, it's got them a little worried. When both Dr. Singh and Ronnie go to get out of there, that's when the neighborhood converges on the doctor's office. Because that nurse practitioner did in fact notice the dead body, and she went telling everybody. But Dr. Singh thinks fast on his feet and says, "I didn't want to tell you guys this, but she got sick." And one of the neighbors says, "Why didn't you just tell us that? This neighborhood is built on trust." But Dr. Singh says, "No, it's not. It's built on hypocrisy. How many neighbors have we killed together? How much gasoline is it going to take for us to realize that things are not normal?" And they're never going to be. After this speech, though, Ronnie starts coughing, and suddenly all the neighbors notice that she's looking in rough shape. And as the neighborhood puts their masks on and grabs both Dr. Singh and Ronnie, Dr. Singh is trying to plead his case that she's not contagious, although they're not listening. They take both Dr. Singh and Ronnie back to their house, they tie him up in a chair, and they light it on fire. And Dr. Singh starts apologizing for bringing the virus home to Ronnie because he must have gotten it at the hospital, but Ronnie says, "It was never you. I got it at a party. One of our neighbor's kids was coughing on me. It was never you." They start, though, saying their goodbyes because the house is quickly going up in flames, but then all of a sudden, they hear gunshots outside, and a bunch of last men come bursting through the door, putting the fire out. And right behind those modern-day firefighters is General Abbott, who walks through and says, "Dr. Singh, I presume." And then finally, over at the preserve, it's going great. Amy and Wendy have really collected this family of hybrids. And they have strict rules. When they get a new hybrid, Amy tells the person to leave it in a designated location and they'll go pick the hybrid up. They don't accept visitors because they just can't be trusted. And if the person isn't willing to meet those demands, then they don't pick the hybrid up. Wendy, though, is a little frustrated because most of the hybrids are more animal than human. She, on the other hand, is more human than animal. So she feels like she doesn't really connect with them. And Amy sits Wendy down and says, "You are perfect just the way you are." This pep talk, though, is interrupted when Bobby comes burrowing through with a ribbon. And he tells both Amy and Wendy that he found it at the fence. And when they go to investigate, it's clear to Amy that the fence has been marked by the last men. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. Once again, thank you for checking out this recap.